So we're going to take a momentous leap here. So let's talk about this. First off, teal games are really hard to nail down.
Hmm.
I chose a few examples here. People could argue that they're orange games. People could argue that, I enact the following games as teal for these reasons. I think that teal games rely on largely two things. I think that there's often an emphasis on something called emergent gameplay. So this is
Mhm.
what happens when you have dozens of different systems that are all working in the background and rubbing against each other in various ways,
Mm.
producing unpredictable results that
Mhm.
even the developers themselves couldn't have predicted.
Mm. Mhm.
This creates a lot of opportunity for novelty, creativity, and fun storytelling, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one characteristic of a teal game.
Uh-huh.
Another one is a game that plays with perspectives, or at least makes a place for perspectives. And I think that the teal games that I've chosen here sort of do that. And I'm not sure, again, how popular
Mm.
these games are with their audience.
Mm.
Another thing we'll notice is we're getting into these higher tiered games, higher altitude games. The resolution drops quite a bit.
Yeah, I think like we're gonna see like in upcoming years here, like the emergence of these levels, just because we need powerful systems to be able to do emergent gameplay. The more systems you got running, the more processes you can have going on, more
Totally,
levels in the game.
totally agree. No, totally agree. And I think that this first game I'm going to show, which has been in development for something like 15 years or something crazy like that, ongoing, it's still available to people for free. You can play this game for free right now if you want to. But along with Crusader Kings 3, this has the deepest, steepest learning curve of any video game I've ever come across.
Wow.
And that is a game called Dwarf Fortress. This is what Dwarf Fortress looks like.
Wow.
It's all ASCII, right? So it's all, keyboard symbols, and the interface is all keyboard. It's bulky, it's cumbersome, it's kind of
Yeah.
ugly, but it's
Wow.
deep. It's deep. So this is one of those colony management games where your job is to be a colony manager. So what does that mean? You are not necessarily controlling any individual dwarves, which are your colonists, but you are setting the jobs. You are, sort of creating the workflows, and then your dwarves go and do all the things that they're supposed to do. Now, this game has the most complex interlocking systems I've ever seen of any game everywhere. I mean, any encounter, like literally every part of every dwarf's body has a system to it. So they get into a fight, they can like your third toe on your left foot was decapitated by a you know what I mean? It gets like really nitty gritty, which
Wow.
allows for a lot of really, really cool gameplay. Now, the thing that turns people off about this game is what it looks like, for one, and the user interface, which again is very, very clumsy and archaic. So they're in the process
Mm.
of modernizing this game for Steam. So it's about to look less like this and more like this.
Huh.
Which, come on, that's night and day. I mean, it still looks like a
Yeah, yeah,
1995
totally.
video game, but
Yeah.
that's way more accessible.
Huh.
So endlessly complex game, and again, it's a story generator. One of the points of the game, one of the sort of the slogans around it, is losing is fun. The point of the game is to fail, and to fail in a glorious way, kind of like Crusader Kings 3.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I see here it influenced Minecraft. I see on here in Wikipedia.
Yep. Yep. It was
Wow.
a big influence for Minecraft. Absolutely.
Yeah, and like you said, losing the resolution of the game. It makes sense because they're trying to do really, really complex stuff around emergent gameplay, but doing it in the limited systems that are available. So it's like, yeah,
Exactly. Yep.
more
That's exactly
computing power, we're gonna see more.
Yeah, this is the type of the game that like amps up your CPU,
Yeah,
but keeps your GPU nice and cool. You
yeah.
know what I mean? It doesn't tax your graphics very much.
Nifty.
The
Interesting.
other piece about this, the other thing I think makes it integral is that each of the dwarves in your colony, each of them
Mhm.
has their own first person motivations, their likes and their dislikes and all that. They have second person relationships, right?
Mhm.
And these relationships give them various degrees of happiness or unhappiness, and then they have their third person skills and roles and things like that. So again, it's making a
Wow.
space for these perspectives, and all three of those different kinds of motivations create even more emergent gameplay for the dwarves individually and the dwarves together as a group.
Wow. Sounds nuts. Have you played this a lot?
I've played this a ton, but not as much as the next game I'm going to play.
Okay.
So the next game I'm going to show is simultaneously a simplification of Dwarf Fortress, but also sort of an improvement, at least in terms of graphics, certainly in terms of accessibility. And I got to say, this is the game I have spent by far the most hours of my life playing. I'm a little bit embarrassed. I'm not going to show you a screenshot of Steam because it's embarrassing. You know, people say it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert. All I can say is I'm about to become an expert in Rimworld. Rimworld, one of the most unfortunately titled video games in history. I'll let you guys come to your own unsavory jokes about it. But this is another colony management game, and it shares a lot of the qualities with Dwarf Fortress, except it looks prettier, even while still looking like a 1998 game. But I'm an old man. I have a lot of video game nostalgia, as you can see from this presentation. So I love these graphics. I love these graphics. So same type of thing. Every colonist has their own first person needs and wants and desires and drives and motivations, their second person relationships and marriages and family connections. If someone in your family dies, that colonist is going to be very unhappy, and that's going to affect their performance, and that's going to affect the colonist performance, and that's going to piss off other colonists who can have a mental break and they can attack another. So it's, again, all of these systems, all of these things that can go wrong. It's basically a Murphy's Law simulator.
Wow. Yeah. Fascinating.
So you can see here, they're mining, they're building farms, they're it starts with that survival impulse. But it's a story generator, like so many of these really, really great games are. And in fact, I'll show you the actual launch trailer for Rimworld, which I think, which has some audio to it, which will show some of the stories that are possible. By the way, the answer is over 3,000. I've spent over 3,000 hours playing this game.
That's pretty good.
To be fair, it's been over like 8 years, but that's a lot of hours. All right, so let me cue up the trailer video because it's hilarious. It's kind of adorable, and it shows you what Rimworld actually is.
You might think this colony humble. It was no simple undertaking. The three of us crash-landed here. Elena, a princess.
Manual labor is unbecoming.
Greg, librarian. Good with books, not much else.
And what use is a washed-up soldier like you, Nelson?
Now we are survivors.
We built, mined, harvested,
Endured frightful conditions.
and manhunting rabbits.
Beastly pirates raided us.
We captured some,
Recruited others.
We lived new lives.
entertained ourselves.
In time, Greg and Elena married.
One must compromise one's standards here.
For company, we tamed turtles.
But not everything could be tamed.
Greg started to drink.
You wouldn't stop cheating on me.
Others know how to treat a lady, Greg.
That was when Greg broke down and ran, naked, into a lake.
Yeah, well, let's not forget when Nelson hung out with his llama all day instead of building solar panels.
We all need downtime, Greg.
Despite everything, there was progress.
We began work on a ship to set us free.
But there will be no escape today. This is my base.
This is my sanctuary.
This is my palace.
This is our colony.
So if you're watching this right now and you think all of this has been building up to an infomercial for Rimworld, you're basically right. I want everyone to
That's hilarious.
stop the show there.
Nice.
Yeah, the other thing I like about Rimworld too, Ryan, is that you're actually, when you're managing the colony, what you're doing is you're managing these colonists individually and collectively.
You're
managing their interiors and their exteriors.
Yeah, you can see. I mean, that's why we've already broken record at this point, but like, yeah, you can see finally that trying to pay some attention to all quadrants, but have to do it in like a really, really stripped down way in some aspects, like the graphics or whatever, so that way you can allow the complexity on other levels. And hopefully, again, I think with more computing power, we can do that in a more full-bodied way. I'd say three-dimensional, not just in graphics, but like in the feel of inhabiting the game.
That's right.
Yeah, but this is where you're at, and you can tell how complex those two games are that you shared, of what you'd have to do to get involved in them.
And that's kind of, as you're pointing out, I mean, it's in terms of inhabiting games like this, it gives you all the opportunities to, but you're going to inhabit that game according to wherever you are in your own development. So I'm, hopefully more integral than not these days. So I'm able to enact it, and I'm able to see how I'm managing
yeah
your way. This kind of reminds me of Ken's myth of the given. There's no single video game here. It's actually a different video game.
Well, it makes
cosmic address that plays it.
One, especially a game like that, you could imagine. I mean, like, too, like if once the user interface is better, where it just like maybe it doesn't require as much, it's not as sweaty to get into the game. For example, if you have better user interface, things like that. But still, let's say it's like running a colony or a civilization. Well, a person might run it like a red civilization because that's going to be possible in an integral framework. But like that's what we're talking about there, is like what possibilities exist, and with these games you get more and more possibilities for the dynamics and nuances and gameplay.
That's such a great point. Yeah, no, totally. And a game like Rimworld or Dwarf Fortress actually gives you those stories all the way up and down the spiral. So you start off, like I said, and you need to survive. You need to collect resources, find food, build shelter, etc. So it starts with Crimson. Your next step is to solidify your relationships, to find more colonists, to grow your colony, to create trust between your colonists. The next stage is to like fuck up anyone who comes into your territory and tries to take your shit. You kill them dead, right? And then there's Amber, where you begin actually forming relationships with other colonies around you and and all that. And then Orange, where you're building new things and crafting and increasing your technology levels. And so you can enact the game however you want. In fact, the game sort of forces you to enact it differently depending on what stage of the game you're actually playing.
Cool. Makes sense.
So now we've got another time capsule, and time capsules for Teal are tricky because, let's be real, guys, integral games don't really fully exist. If they do, only, again, you kind of have to squint your eyes a little bit.
Yeah, stretch it a little.
But this is a game I'm about to show that has, I think, some strong integral signifiers built into it decades ago. And this was actually made from the same guy, Sid Meier's, who created Civilization series. So this is Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri, which is basically kind of like Civilization, except in outer space. And it looks like this because it's a very old game. So it looks kind of like old versions of Civilization, but this is taking place in humanity's far future. And it's interesting when you're going to choose your civilizations, they give you 8 civilizations to choose from. When you read the description of each of the factions, it's literally like they've read the Spiral Dynamics book and created a faction for each level. Like a faction that is clearly magenta. There's a faction that is clearly red, clearly amber, clearly orange, clearly green, and guess what? Clearly teal and turquoise. Clearly. I mean, like in how the factions... Now, this is an old game, so I don't know how much of that lore actually affects gameplay, right? But it was creating a space. It was using content, what I think is strongly integral content. And then there's the premise of the game here. I'm just going to read this from Wikipedia while you watch these janky old graphics. Tell me if you think this sounds remotely kind of, I don't know, tealish. The player discovers that the planet is a dormant, semi-sentient hive organism that will soon experience a metamorphosis which will destroy all human life. Oh, that sounds pretty green, actually. To counter this threat, the player or a computer faction builds, quote, the Voice of Alpha Centauri secret project, which artificially links planet's distributed nervous system into the human data links, delaying the planet's metamorphosis into a full self-awareness, but incidentally increasing its ultimate intelligence substantially by giving it access to all of humanity's accumulated knowledge. Finally, the player or a computer faction embraces the, quote, ascent to transcendence, in which humans too join their brains with the hive organism in the metamorphosis to godhood. Thus, Alpha Centauri closes with a swell of hope and wonder in place of the expected triumphalism, reassuring that the events of the game weren't the entirety of mankind's future, but just another step.
Interesting. Yeah.
Some strong teal language in there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Building
So a
off
lot.
of green themes, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. So again, a lot in the story and the lore of it. Nice.